At family reunion, my sister's kid announced, "Mom says you never give back to this family." Everyone clapped. I smiled and said, "Perfect. Then she won't miss the $4,000 I cover for her mortgage every month." My sister went pale sooner than I expected. I, 34 stood there at the family reunion, plastic cup of lemonade in my hand, watching my nephew climb onto a chair like he was about to deliver the State of the Union. The kid was 12, and he had that confidence only children raised by people who complain about everything possess. My sister stood behind him, arms crossed, wearing that self-righteous smirk I'd grown to despise over the years. The backyard was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely recognized, my parents looking elderly and tired in their lawn chairs. Someone had hung string lights between the trees, and the grill was smoking with burgers nobody would eat because my aunt had also made her famous dry chicken. It was the kind of gathering that happened once every few years, where everyone pretended we were closer than we actually were. My nephew cleared his throat dramatically. The conversations died down. He looked right at me and announced that his mom said I never gave back to this family, that I was selfish and only cared about my own life in the city. The words came out rehearsed, like he'd practiced them in the car on the way over. Everyone clapped. Actually clapped. My uncle started it, then my cousins joined in, and soon the whole backyard was applauding this kid for calling me out. My mother looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. My father just stared at his burger. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like a calm realization that this moment had been building for years. My sister's eyes were gleaming with victory. She'd orchestrated this, turned a 12-year-old into her mouthpiece, and now she was waiting for me to either apologize or storm off like the selfish city person she'd painted me as. I smiled instead. I told them that was perfect, and if that's how everyone felt, then my sister wouldn't miss the $4,000 I'd been covering for her mortgage every single month. I kept my voice pleasant, conversational, like I was commenting on the weather. My sister went pale so fast I thought she might actually faint. The color just drained right out of her face, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. My nephew looked confused, glancing between us. The clapping had stopped. The backyard had gone completely silent except for a dog barking somewhere down the street. My aunt asked what I was talking about. My mother sat forward in her chair. My sister tried to speak, but nothing came out at first, just this strangled sound. So I explained. 3 years ago, my sister and her husband bought a house they couldn't afford. They'd stretched themselves thin trying to keep up with their friends, and within 6 months, they were drowning. She called me crying, desperate, saying they'd lose everything. She begged me not to tell anyone, especially not our parents, because she couldn't bear the shame. I'd been doing well. My software consulting business had taken off, and I had the money. She was my sister. So I agreed to help with the monthly shortfall until they got back on their feet. For $1,000 every single month, directly into her account. She told her husband it was a bonus from her part-time job. She told our parents they were managing fine. 3 years. $144,000. Give or take. The backyard stayed silent. My sister finally found her voice and tried to stammer out something about how that was private, how I had no right to bring it up. But her voice was shaky, and everyone was staring at her now instead of me. My uncle asked if it was true. My sister's husband, who'd been flipping burgers at the grill, had turned around and was staring at her with this expression of complete confusion. He asked what I was talking about. What mortgage money? That's when I realized he didn't know either. She hadn't just hidden it from the family. She'd hidden it from him too. My sister started crying, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry, cornered animal tears. She said I was ruining everything, that I was cruel for exposing her like this. She turned to our parents and told them I was lying, that I was making it up because I was vindictive. I pulled out my phone and offered to show the bank transfers. Every month, same amount, same date. My sister lunged forward like she wanted to grab my phone, but her husband caught her arm. He asked her again, quieter this time, if it was true. She crumpled, admitted it, said she hadn't told him because she was ashamed, because she didn't want him to feel like a failure. She turned to me with pure venom in her eyes and said that yes, I'd helped her, but that's what family does, and I was supposed to keep my mouth shut about it. I reminded her that she'd just had her son publicly call me selfish in front of everyone. She'd orchestrated a humiliation, and everyone had clapped along. I asked her what she expected me to do. Just take it quietly. My mother tried to calm things down, saying we should discuss this inside, away from everyone. But I was done. I told my sister that effective immediately, the payments were done. She could figure out her mortgage on her own. I'd given her 3 years to get stable, and instead of working on their finances, she'd spent it playing victim and building resentment against me. Her husband looked shell-shocked. He asked how they'd been making the mortgage if her part-time job barely covered groceries. My sister couldn't answer. The math was simple, though. Without my $4,000, they were about to be very short. My father finally spoke up and asked why I'd never said anything. I explained that my sister had asked me to keep it private, and I'd respected that because I wasn't helping her for recognition. I was helping her because she was my sister and she needed it. But apparently, privacy only mattered when it protected her. The reunion dissolved after that. People started making excuses to leave. My aunt packed up her dry chicken. Cousins suddenly remembered they had long drives home. Within an hour, the backyard was nearly empty. My nephew approached me before they left. He looked smaller now, less confident. He said his mom had told him to say those things, that I never came around and didn't care about family. He asked if it was true that I'd been helping them all this time. I told him it was. He apologized, and I could tell he meant it. I said it wasn't his fault, that he shouldn't be put in the middle of adult problems. My sister loaded him into the car without looking at me. Her husband hung back and thanked me quietly for the help over the years, said he wished he'd known. He looked humiliated and angry, but not at me. He drove off after her, and I wondered what their drive home would be like. My parents asked me to stay for a bit. We sat in the empty backyard, string lights swaying in the evening breeze. My mother said I should have told them. I asked what difference it would have made. They were both retired, living on fixed incomes. They couldn't have helped, and knowing would have only stressed them out. My father said my sister had been complaining about me for months, building this narrative that I'd abandoned the family for my fancy city life. He said he'd pushed back on it, but she was persistent. She'd clearly convinced enough relatives that her version was true. I told them I'd been visiting, calling, helping in ways they didn't see. But I'd been quiet about it because making a show of generosity felt wrong. Apparently, that had been a mistake. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the reunion. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Extended family members have been calling to apologize, saying they didn't know the full story. Some of them sound genuinely sorry. Others sound like they're just embarrassed they clapped. My sister hasn't contacted me at all, but her husband has. He called 3 days after the reunion and told me they needed to talk. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our cities. He looked exhausted. He told me he'd had no idea about the money, and finding out at the reunion had devastated him. They'd had a massive fight that night. She'd admitted that the financial pressure had been crushing her, and instead of telling him the truth, she'd built up this fantasy where I was the villain who'd abandoned them. It made her feel better to blame someone else for their situation. He said they'd been to a financial counselor. Without my monthly payments, they were looking at selling the house within 6 months. They'd already missed one payment, and the bank had called. They'd overextended themselves significantly, and there was no way to make up the $4,000 gap on their current incomes. He didn't ask me to resume the payments. He actually told me he understood why I'd stopped, said his wife had crossed a line. But he wanted me to know that he appreciated what I'd done, even if she couldn't bring herself to say it. I asked why she'd turned everyone against me if I'd been helping her all along. He said she'd convinced herself that I was only helping out of pity, that it was my way of looking down on them. She'd twisted the generosity into something ugly in her own mind, and eventually, she'd started believing her own story. The counselor had apparently suggested therapy for her. He said she'd agreed to go, but he wasn't sure if it would help. Their marriage was strained now, too. Finding out about the money had made him question what else she'd been hiding. I felt bad for him. He'd been working 2 jobs trying to keep them afloat, not knowing that his wife had a safety net she'd never told him about. He'd been killing himself while she'd been painting me as the bad guy. My parents called that week, too. They'd talked to my sister, and she'd finally admitted everything to them. My mother cried, saying she felt terrible for not defending me at the reunion. My father was angry at my sister for manipulating the family. They asked if I'd consider helping her again. I said no. It wasn't about the money. I had the money. But my sister needed to face reality, and constantly bailing her out wasn't helping her. It was enabling a fantasy life she couldn't afford. My mother understood, though I could tell she was torn. My father supported my decision completely. He said my sister needed to learn that actions had consequences, and what she'd done at the reunion was unforgivable. Update 2. A month has passed. My sister finally called me. No apology, just asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet her at a park near my parents' house. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing old yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt. She sat down on the bench and stared at her hands for a long time before speaking. She said she was sorry, not just for the reunion, but for everything. For taking my help and resenting me for it. For lying to her husband. For turning the family against me. She said the therapy was helping her see how twisted her thinking had become. I asked her why she'd done it. Why orchestrate that humiliation if I'd been helping her all along? She cried. Real tears this time, not the angry ones from the reunion. She said she'd felt so ashamed of needing help that it had curdled into resentment. Every month when my payment came through, she felt like a failure. She started telling herself stories to make it hurt less. That I was only helping to feel superior. That I was holding it over her. That I didn't really care about her. Eventually, those stories became her reality. She'd convinced herself that I was the problem, that if I really loved her, I'd help without making her feel small. Except I'd never made her feel small. I'd never mentioned it. I'd respected her privacy completely. She'd done it all to herself. She said they were selling the house. They'd already found a buyer, and they'd be moving into a rental within 2 months. Her husband was still barely speaking to her. Her son had asked questions she didn't know how to answer. The family reunion had destroyed more than just her relationship with me. I asked if she'd told her husband the whole truth yet. She nodded. About the money, about the lies, about using their son to attack me. He was devastated, she said. Not just about the money, but about the manipulation. He'd started talking about separation. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was distant. This was the consequence of years of choices she'd made. I told her I accepted her apology, but that things between us had changed. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I wasn't going to resume the payments. She said she understood and that she wasn't asking for money. She just wanted me to know she was sorry and that she was trying to fix herself. She asked if maybe, someday, we could rebuild some kind of relationship. I told her maybe, but it would take time and proof that she'd actually changed. Words were easy. Actions mattered. We sat in silence for a while, watching kids play on the swings. She thanked me for meeting her and left. I stayed on that bench for another hour, trying to figure out how I felt about everything. Update 3. 3 months since the reunion now. The family dynamics have completely shifted. My sister sold her house and moved into a small rental across town. Her husband is still with her, but they're in counseling. My nephew has been quieter at family gatherings, more observant, less eager to perform. My extended family treats me differently now. Some with respect, some with awkwardness. The ones who clapped have mostly avoided me. A few have apologized directly, admitting they'd been fed a narrative they should have questioned. My sister and I are civil now. We've had coffee twice since that park meeting. She's working on herself, taking real steps. She got a better job, and her husband picked up a certification that increased his income. They're managing their bills without help now, living within their means. She told me last week that the therapy had helped her understand she'd been dealing with depression and shame for years, and instead of addressing it, she'd projected it onto everyone around her. Especially me, because I represented what she thought she'd failed to become. I'm not sure we'll ever be close again like we were as kids. Too much has happened, but I can see she's trying, and that counts for something. The real victim in all of this was my nephew. He'd been weaponized by his mother, used as a tool in her resentment, and forced to watch his family implode. I've been making an effort to spend time with him separately, take him to games, just be a normal uncle. He deserves that. My parents are relieved things have calmed down. My mother still gets teary when she thinks about the reunion, about how she didn't speak up. I've told her repeatedly that it's okay, that she couldn't have known. As for me, I learned something important. Helping people in silence doesn't protect you from their resentment. Sometimes people need their struggles witnessed to feel validated, and hiding my help had allowed my sister to build whatever narrative she wanted about me. I still believe in helping family, but I'll never again do it while pretending it's not happening. Honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is better than silent generosity that breeds resentment. The $4,000 a month goes into my savings now. I'm thinking about using it for something meaningful, maybe setting up a college fund for my nephew. Something that can't be twisted into ammunition. Family is complicated. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty or gratitude. But sometimes, when people hit rock bottom, they find their way back to something real. I hope that's what's happening with my sister. Time will tell. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot to us.